So you guys have taken the time to explore several resources about the enteric nervous system, this second brain that we have in our gut, managing the process of digestion and affecting our mood and behavior. I just want to take a moment here to tie up some loose ends and point out sort of the most important aspects of what you've learned so far and zero in on what the takeaway might be from this information for the average person who's looking to use what they're learning in this class to improve their life. So the enteric nervous system is one of the oldest parts of the human nervous system, if not the oldest part to evolve, and it's based on this very early design for a nervous system that we see in creatures like a jellyfish or sea anemone. It's simply a loose net of nerves that innervate the lining of the gut. One small inconsistency in the Scientific American article, they stated that the enteric nervous system had 100 million neurons, and the text stated that the enteric nervous system had 200 to 500 million neurons. The text is more recent and more accurate, but it's not super important to memorize this number, but just to give you an idea, that's about as many nerves as you find in the human spinal cord. So it's a pretty large and powerful system. But I think what was really interesting in the discussion of the enteric nervous system was the role of the microbiome. So these are the trillions of microorganisms that live inside the human body and particularly in our gut. We're wildly outnumbered. Our microorganisms outnumber human body cells by 10 to 1, which is kind of amazing. So I think the work of Dr. Xiao's lab was really exciting because she's highlighting the connection that her and the scientists who work with her are starting to make between the brain and behavior and the gut microbiome. Now, all of their work is in mice, but I want to highlight the main ways that she said that the gut microbiome can influence the brain. So because it was presented with a little technical detail, so here's sort of a simplification of what she presented. So your microbiome, the microorganisms living in your gut, can affect your brain in three main ways. First of all, they can produce neurotransmitters, particularly serotonin. Sometimes you'll hear a statistic thrown about that 90% of the serotonin produced in the human body is produced in the gut. And that's kind of mind-blowing. One thing to remember is that most of that serotonin that's getting made in the gut is staying in the gut and getting used in the gut simply to manage the process of digestion. So it's not the case that 90% of the serotonin in the brain is produced in the gut, but we do think that it's possible that some of the serotonin being produced in the gut, partially by microbes, is traveling to the central nervous system and affecting people's mood and behavior. Microorganisms can also stimulate the vagus nerve, which is this primary conduit between the brainstem and all of the guts. So the vagus nerve enables two-way communication between the brain and the guts, and microorganisms can directly stimulate it, causing it to fire. And finally, microorganisms can trigger an immune response, which then goes on to affect the central nervous system. So I think a really natural question to have at this point in your study of the enteric nervous system is, wow, this information's kind of mind-blowing and exciting. How does it apply to the treatment of psychological disorders or health and well-being for average people? And the answer is, we're really not sure yet. So Elaine Xiao demonstrated a lot of really exciting research in which manipulating the species of microbiota that were present in the gut of mice allowed her to manipulate characteristics like communication, depression-like behaviors, and other really exciting factors we would love to influence in human beings. But the fact is, in terms of being able to manipulate the human microbiome in a therapeutic way, we're really not there yet. So we know that there is this positive correlation between neuropsychiatric conditions like bipolar or schizophrenia and gastrointestinal disorders like IBS. So this positive correlation means if you have a neuropsychiatric condition, you're more likely to have a gastrointestinal disorder. But we don't know what the causal relationship, if any, is between these two conditions that commonly co-occur. So it might be that some of these neuropsychiatric issues are triggering digestive trouble, but it might just as well be that digestive issues are influencing the brain. Or a third factor could be causing both. And what muddies the water even further is the fact that many of the medications that we use to treat common psychological conditions have an effect on serotonin and therefore have an effect on the gut. So it's really difficult for scientists to tease out cause and effect in a way that would allow us to create treatments for human beings. So your book mentions the idea of psychobiotics, which is essentially the concept of taking living microbes and administering them to a human being as a medication intended to treat a neuropsychiatric condition. There's been very limited study of psychobiotics in human beings and not a lot of controlled clinical trials, so we're really just not there yet in terms of research to determine whether this promising idea actually works for people. The Scientific American article also mentioned the idea of vagal nerve stimulation, which is an electrical device implanted inside the chest, attached to the vagus nerve and stimulating the vagus nerve. And it's something that's been tried as an experimental treatment for people with treatment-resistant depression that doesn't respond to medication or other conventional depression treatments. But unfortunately, the research really just does not back up this treatment. There have only been a couple of controlled trials, and they didn't show a strong positive effect. So the promise of using the microbiome to alleviate human suffering is very exciting, but it's way down the road. Now, the fact that the jury's not really in on whether or not we can manipulate the microbiome to improve human well-being has not stopped the marketing manager at your local natural food store from stocking probiotics that are making all kinds of outlandish health claims. The fact is, there's not conclusive research to back up any of the claims made by the probiotic treatments that are on the market today. And in fact, the human gut flora is really complex, and it may be that you have a balanced gut now, and taking one of these products could throw off that healthy balance. So it's really kind of an unknown and something each person should talk to their doctor about if they're interested in it. The only thing we do know is that if you want to have a wide variety of healthy microbes in your gut, you need to feed them their favorite foods. And what microbes love are whole, simple plant foods. So there's a wide variety of microbes in a typical healthy human gut, and each one loves some particular type of plant food, especially leafy greens and fibrous plants. So at this point, if you're interested in using what you just learned about the enteric nervous system to improve your own well-being, this is really the strategy to fuel that healthy microbiome with the veggies that they crave.